Well, you know what it's like reading the news these days, don't you? Hi, everybody. I'm Bill Whittle here with Steve Green and Scott Ott. And today's Right Angle is about something that actually kind of is awful enough to kind of pull you out of the news, you know? So what I'm trying to say here is if you read the Drudge Report, or especially if you scroll down the pages of Instapundit and you see what's going on, you're left with kind of a mumbling sort of a, you know, progressives get off my yard, and the next thing you know is going to be the headline that says "Man shakes fist at cloud," you know, and it's just hopeless, and it's just this low level kind of toothache. But every now and then you get a sharp biting pain, and I have to relay one of these, just because I find it so remarkable. So here we go. We're quoting from the Instapundit story now. Former President Barack Obama claimed credit Tuesday for the recent boom in U.S. oil production, immediately after praising the Paris Climate Accords, which committed the U.S. to drastically reducing greenhouse gas emissions. You'll remember this coming from President who said the nation can't drill their way out of soaring gas prices. Stay with me, folks. And by the way, when I read this quote, it's really, really important. Try for a moment to put aside the blinding narcissism of it and just listen to the sentence structure, and you'll realize you're talking to a guy who came in first in his class in fifth grade. Here we go. This is the former president speaking. I was extraordinarily proud of the Paris Accords because, you know, I know we're in oil country and we need American energy, and by the way, American energy production. You wouldn't always know it, but it went up every year I was president. That whole suddenly America's like the biggest oil producer and the biggest gas, that was me, people. The only thing that you really have to take out of that is that was me, people. Steve, I know that the train is pulled out of the station, and sometimes I have to go out on the tracks and get out my binoculars and make sure it's still receding, right, because the ride was so terrible that it's like Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton are like slasher movie villains, you know. They just keep coming back for that last scare, and just when you think he's dead, you get it again. So President Obama claims credit for America's tremendous boon in oil energy, when I kind of thought that it was the Republicans that were being mocked for saying things like drill, baby, drill, and it was the Democrats who canceled the pipeline and things. I'm confused.
Does this mean that Barack Obama is taking the blame, I suppose, for our increased reliance on fossil fuels and our contributions to anthropogenic climate change?
Hold on. Is that good or bad?
Yes. No.
If it's bad, then it's Trump's fault. But,
yeah.
But it took me a second.
I saw this on Twitter this morning. There was a 1-minute video clip, and I thought, oh, Steve, don't watch the clip. You read the text. Don't read the clip. Don't do it. And I clicked play. And he's sitting there in his tuxedo, kind of back in his chair like this, going,
"That was me, people.
That was me." Just slovenly, you know. You were president of the United States. Sit up straight. So the first thing I said after I watched the clip, I dropped an F-bomb. The second thing I said after I watched the clip is I dropped another F-bomb, only this time with some further anatomical instructions about what to do with his mouth. And the third thing I said, and this is what I actually put up on Twitter, was I decided, okay, take a deep breath, relax. Let's take this like an adult, the way he wouldn't, the Lightbringer wouldn't. And I addressed him directly. I said, no, not Mr. President. You're not president anymore. Barack, can I call you Barack? Yeah, I can call you. If you can sit like a slob, I can call you Barack. You are president of the United States. You will never face the electorate again. You have your tens of millions of dollars. According to a story I just read, you're going to get hundreds of millions more. You're set. Stop gaslighting us already. You don't need to do it. We're done. But if I can get factual for a moment, instead of just complaining about this guy, because I spent 8 years of my professional life complaining about this guy. I don't want to do it anymore. But yes, U.S. oil and natural gas production went up every year that he was president on private lands. It went down every year he was president off the coasts and in the Gulf of Mexico and on federal lands because he was trying to put a stop to it. And as somebody else said, I think on Twitter elsewhere this morning, Barack Obama taking credit for increased U.S. energy production under his watch is like King George III taking credit for the birth of the United States of America. The ego on this guy, Bill, I'm sorry, I'm done.
No, I was kind of done 2 years ago, and the done never ends. Where do you go with this, Scott? I'll just give you three little things. The narcissism and the grammar and all. That's one. The factual. It's not just not true. It's anti-true. That's one. And one of the ones I'm most interested in is how he talks about how proud he is of the Paris Climate Accords. What I find interesting about the Paris Climate Accords, a tremendous piece by John Stossel on this, was essentially the IPCC, the International Panel on Climate Change, solicited every government in the world and said, what would you like to do about global warming? And you wrote it down on the back of a little envelope, and you attached your stamp to the little corner, and you sent it back to the IPCC. So what Stossel pointed out in his piece was that China, for example, pledged to reach peak carbon dioxide in 2030. In other words, they're going to keep pumping out more and more and more CO2, but they'll peak in 2030, and that was their contribution to the Paris Climate Agreement. And as Stossel's experts pointed out, China has always known that their CO2 is going to peak in the 2030s. In other words, it means exactly nothing. Some countries wrote in stuff like, "We would like to be rich enough to eventually be able to abide by the Paris Climate Accords." Okay, let's put that in there too. And the only country that went to the table with anything serious was the United States. And I suspect when Donald Trump looked at this and said, so China agrees to do what? To continue growing at the rate it's growing, and they're off the hook, and India makes similar promises, and they're off the hook, and we have to make all these cuts when, in point of fact, we're the only people in the whole world that are actually reducing carbon emissions. I don't know, Scotty. I'm just sometimes when I think about having a president who refers to himself as Mr. Spock and who is president of the Harvard Law Review, I think sometimes I'm just not capable of processing how brilliant he must be.
Well, we try, but we can't.
We try in our little way.
That. Yes, it occurs to me while you guys were talking, I had this little fantasy play out in my mind, and what happened in my little fantasy is we were at a presidential press conference at the White House during the Obama administration. And a reporter stood up and said, "Mr. President, I have just come from the future. I have just been in 2018. And in that year, by the way, I want to tell you that Donald Trump is president of the United States, number one. And number two, America is bigger than Saudi Arabia in oil production, and gasoline is relatively cheap, and so a lot more people can afford it. Mr. President Obama, who do you think is to blame for this?" What do you think President Obama would have said? Is he going to say,
"Not me. I've been doing my best to strangle this industry from the beginning"?
That's right. And so it's a rather convenient fiction ex post facto. And from the context of that, Steve, you didn't say exactly where, but it sounds like he's in oil country. Where he's making those remarks because of a little phrase you threw in there at one point in his quote. And so the idea that you can attach yourself to anything that's going well, even if it's something that you radically opposed at the time, it's what politicians do. And I think it really gives the lie to this idea that Barack Obama was no real politician, that he was an intellectual, that he was a constitutional scholar, that he was a community activist that just wanted to make people's lives better. And he certainly wasn't craven and, stooping and scraping to get votes. The fact that even now he's so sensitive about his reputation that he wants to take credit for things that not only factually were not his to take credit for, but also things that he would have actively opposed if we had told him in advance that they were about to happen. He would have done anything he could. And in fact, one might argue he did everything that he could to prevent this from happening. And now that it's happened, well, that was me. That's one way of looking at history, but it's a little tougher when you get a chance to actually go back and read what he really stood for him to be able to continue to hold that position. The good thing is he'll never have to face the music of that, because even to this day, there's nobody in the media who's going to stand up and challenge him on that, except for perhaps us.
It's funny that you were mentioning that you had a little fantasy thing going in your head while we were talking, because I had the exact same experience. I don't generally listen to what you guys say. I just kind of tune it out. It's kind of like a noise in my ear. And I'm sure it's the same for you too as well. But I actually had this little fantasy vision about what a cocktail party must look like at Harvey Weinstein's. Oh, sorry, not Harvey Weinstein's house anymore. Let's just say Ben Affleck's. And in the corner there, way off in the corner, and nobody wants to disturb their privacy, are four pillars of the Democratic Party: Hillary Clinton, Bill Clinton, Barack Obama, and Al Gore. And they're sitting around and they're drinking cocktails, quite a few as a matter of fact. And Bill Clinton says, "I did not have sex with that woman, Monica Lewinsky." And they all laugh. And then Hillary says, "I did not keep any classified emails on that private server." They start crying. Then Al Gore says, "I invented the internet." And then they're about to cry. And then finally Barack Obama says, "And I'm responsible for America's oil benefit boom." At this point, they start to wet their pants. And this is a kind of party that you think they must really, really, really enjoy. I kind of enjoy talking about those kind of parties, and we get to do that because we don't work for them or for the man or for the woman or for the not that there's anything wrong with that. We work for you, and if you want to be one of our bosses, we would certainly appreciate it. You can go to BillWhittle.com, become a member. Thanks for joining us at Right Angle. We'll see you next week.